So with these sweeteners in tow, Michael Jackson buys the entire catalog for the $47.5 million that it was being asked for. And Paul McCartney was completely blindsided in this whole circumstance.
Did they you may not know this, but did they have a falling out prior to this? Okay. So they were already kind of
I don't know that they had a falling out prior to. They had a falling out afterwards.
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine doing that to somebody that is a friend, even if it's a genius business deal. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You are listening to Tape Spaghetti, the podcast about the twisted and tangled innards of the music industry. Some of this content may not be for all listeners or viewers, so if it's not for you, no harm, no foul. We'll just catch you on the next one. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. Here we go.
Welcome back to another episode of Tape Spaghetti. It's a new year and a new you, but it's still the same old me and Blake.
That's right.
I am Scott Marquardt. That is Blake Weiland. We are your hosts, as usual. And we're back again. I'm excited. We started this thing in 2025. Pretty cool to see it coming into 2026. We're not dead yet.
That's right. In fact, I'm feeling pretty good. After having a nice sick holiday. I'm like, all right, back on top.
You're getting back to it?
Yeah.
I'm doing the old sober January thing, which is I was explaining that to a few of my leaders at work, and it's always a strange thing when I say that because it makes it I feel like it makes it sound like I drink all the time, like I'm just drinking all day every day, which is not the case. But I will say, I don't usually have a totally dry weekend altogether, and I had one this weekend, so that's been a change.
Yeah,
I've been sleeping a lot. Feel good. I did learn a valuable lesson, which is that it's not just lack of sleep that makes me a spaz at work, because I've slept incredibly well and still been a spaz at work today. So it's not those things. It's nothing external. It's a blend of deep inset problems in my own being, as well as a whole bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, it is a weird thing because I know what you mean when you're like, oh, I'm doing dry January, or somebody comes to you and like, oh, sorry, yeah, I'm sober, and then you have to be like, well, I'm not, and then that makes it sound like
not me.
You're just hammered 24/7. It's like, no, I still enjoy the occasional tipple, so I can't sit there and with a straight face be like, I'm sober, but it's like, well, and I'm not an alcoholic either, but I'm not sober. But I am sober right now.
Right. Presently at work talking to you.
Yeah,
I am. But it has led to me needing to create diversions for fun. One fun thing of which I am doing this evening is I am taking a page out of the old Weiland playbook, and I have an appointment at a sauna.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a spot that opened up nearby me that's it's a really small place, and they have a couple of sauna rooms in there that you can book for 45-minute sessions. So me and the lady are going over to sweat it out.
There you go. That is the way. Yep. That's where I was at 11 p.m. last night, just sweating away.
Yeah, you don't have to make an appointment. It's just right there in the backyard.
It's a dream come true for me. I never thought in a million years I'd be able to pull that off, and I did. One of the most self-indulgent things I've ever done in my entire life in 2025, and I'll admit it, I don't regret it.
You know, I saw a Reddit post yesterday that was like, what's the millennial midlife crisis going to be?
Oh,
and
that's probably right there. Yeah.
The top answer was I just bought an espresso machine, which is what I was already thinking, because I have a few friends that have bought espresso machines, not me, but a sauna's a good one to be up there.
Yeah, that seems really on the nose. A millennial, that's my version of a red Corvette.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'd like a red Corvette. That'd be okay too.
Little red Corvette. Well, that's a good segue into our podcast that we have, where we mostly talk about music or music adjacent things.
Yeah, we try to anyway. What do you got for us today?
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. So I wonder if you've seen some of the headlines recently about, and it could be any of a bunch of different people that have done it, whether it's Justin Bieber or Pink Floyd or Queen or Bruce Springsteen. Have you seen the headlines about how so-and-so, massive star sold their catalog of music for, somewhere between $400 million and $1.5 billion. Have you seen these headlines from last year?
Yeah. And it's not just legacy acts. Like, well, it's kind of weird to say that Justin Bieber's a legacy act, but he's been doing it a long time at this point. Like, he really has. But even newer breakout stars, I think Zach Bryan sold his supposedly for like $380 million, and he only blew up in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah. There's been a lot of these. And it's kind of started in the early 2020s and really caught fire in the last couple of years. Like 2024, 2025 are really big years for closes in this type of transaction. And it interested me. I thought it'd be a good little topic for a slightly more businessier or more financially oriented episode of Tape Spaghetti, as we are wont to do every now and again.
I think it explores a side of the music business that a lot of people hear about, and they'll hear the term publishing rights and all these different things. And maybe a lot of people do know what that is, obviously, within the industry, but a lot of people don't. And so getting that information out there, I think, is helpful. And I think it makes the news more interesting when you see these things happening, and it might explain why somebody would do that. And I have some theories as to why they might do that and why they may not do that. But I think we should get into what you have prepared before I start spewing my opinions on things we haven't fully covered yet.
Yeah. So this will be a fun one. So we'll talk a little bit about, what rights are and all that, which we've talked about more often than I would have anticipated on Tape Spaghetti, because it comes up a lot. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the history of rights sales, how they were treated at different times in the music business, and a couple of really notable examples of this, from David Bowie to famously Paul McCartney and John Lennon, Michael Jackson, that whole kerfuffle. And then we'll take that, we'll keep kind of surfing that wave into what kind of set up the current, you could call it a bubble, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but the current, incredible increase in transactions of this variety that have been occurring lately.
Increase in transactions and increase in the value of those
very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Which, those two things are two sides of the same coin.
True. Yeah, that's right.
When I start telling you that Waylon Jennings hats are selling for $100,000 a piece, I see one more Waylon Jennings hat that's going to be on the market.
You do. And I love this hat. I wear it every day. But if I find out I can flip 40 into 100G, I'm going to do it.
It's gone. Yep. 100%. So, all right. First things first, let's talk a little bit about what rights are. So I've referred to this a few different times over the course of this podcast, but there are two different sides. It's usually how they're referred to, of rights in the music industry. So the first one is the composition rights, aka the publishing rights. A good metaphor to think about this is that these are like the blueprint of a house. They're the design of the thing that's coming. It's the lyrics, it's the melody, and the arrangement as written on paper. This is important. If you're whistling a tune, you're performing the composition in some way or the other. The owner of this is the songwriter and frequently the publishing company, who will sign up songwriters and make deals for their particular rights. Now, these are paid out at a few different in a few different situations. So mechanical royalties are paid when a song is reproduced. So CDs, vinyl, digital downloads famously create a mechanical royalty, which is paid to the songwriter or the publishing company that they're contracted with. And then you also have performance royalties. So these are paid when the song is performed publicly. So radio, if it's on at the supermarket, if it's on at the bar, Spotify streams. And that's one nuance that we've touched on before, which is that the primary way in which people are consuming music had a shift in terms of what type of rights it was oriented under. It shifted from being mechanical royalties because you're buying a CD to being performance royalties because you're just listening to a stream. You're not downloading or reproducing anything exactly. And that is partly to do like it deep down in the boiler room of rights with a lot of the kerfuffle that you see around who's getting paid what in the streaming age, which we've talked about before and I won't really dig into too much here. The third case is sync licensing. And this is really like a lot of the big one-time money for a lot of artists. These are fees paid to use the song itself in a movie, an ad, or a video game. And that actually pays both sides, which I'll cover again. So this specifically, like why it matters for this particular episode, when Bob Dylan sold his catalog to Universal for some $400 million, he sold just his publishing rights. So he sold the words and the melody of the composition, but not necessarily the other half. which I'll talk about now. So the other half is the sound recording. These are typically called the master rights. So you'll frequently hear publishing rights and master rights. I'll refer to them like that throughout the remainder of the podcast. The master rights, if the publishing right is like the blueprint, the master rights are like the house that's built from the blueprint. So this is the specific audio file captured in the studio these days, or like the specific actual master tape that is being created in the studio back in the older days. This is the actual voice of the singer, the sound of the drummer on the record. Typically, these are owned by the record label if an artist had a label. They paid for the studio time, so they kind of own the tape or the recording, whatever that is. And these are paid out at different times. So these are paid out when you have streaming or sales, so Spotify, Apple Music, etc., formerly physical records, not formerly, they still exist, but a little bit less common these days.
Right.
As well as for a master use license, which is kind of what I was touching on earlier with sync licensing. So if a movie wants to use the original recording, they have to pay the owner of the master, right? So an important distinction. If you, Blake Wyland, were to make yet another cover of Yesterday by the Beatles.
Yes, as I want to do.
Yes, as I know that you do every Saturday. You would own the master rights, so you would own that half to it. But you would not own the publishing rights. Paul McCartney or whoever is owning that actual publishing right at that time would own the publishing rights to that song.
Right.
But you own the master. And you'll see this a lot of times too when TV shows and stuff like that will like use a cover of a song in lieu of like the master. That can be often significantly cheaper. And there's nuances as to in what circumstances there are approvals and things like that make it a little bit easier to just like grab somebody's cover of Yesterday rather than to negotiate with the rights holder and owner of Yesterday itself.
Right. And that kind of touches on why famously Dolly Parton was asked if she was upset that everyone knew the Whitney Houston version of I Will Always Love You better than hers. And she was like, no. That bought me my house or something like that, something to that effect. Like, because
her house in 12 South in Nashville.
Yeah. So she owns that side of it. And that song was huge.
Yep.
So made Dolly quite a bit of money.
Yep, exactly. But if Dolly had had a different arrangement, as some artists do, if she had sold her publishing rights, but held on to her master rights, she would not get paid any money when Whitney did a cover of the song.
And that's why you see some artists advising younger artists like, hold on to your publishing, publishing, unless somebody wants to pay you $400 million, but hold on to your publishing.
Right. That is a very common one because it's generally seen that like you're going to have to sell the master rights to a label in order to get the money to promote you for it to matter and all that. But a lot of times artists will continue to own their own publishing rights in some form or fashion. And there's a lot of nuance to this. You can sign different types of publishing deals. You can sign publishing deals where they'll give you an advance and they're just administering your publishing rights versus ones where they buy half of them or buy the whole thing, et cetera, et cetera. But for the purpose of this podcast, dear listener out there, just know there's the publishing rights and the master rights, and they're different in this way in terms of who gets paid and why and how and when.
Right.
Cool?
Yes.
All right. So let's rewind a little bit to what I'll call the dark ages. So back in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, artists were not yet CEOs the way that they kind of are these days. A lot of artists these days are like the CEO of their own brand. But they really were like kind of victims of their own contracts. I mean, it's a little bit similar to like how professional athletes were back then, or even to a certain extent are now. Like the artists are somebody that are signed to a label. The label takes advantage of them in a great variety of ways. And the artist is not necessarily like executing this business strategy across all these different levels the way that they are these days. So our case study for this, and there's a lot of artists that could fall into this category, is going to be Little Richard.
Okay.
Famously, the architect of rock and roll. So in 1955, Little Richard signed a deal with Specialty Records. The owner's name was Art Rupe or Rupe, not really sure. The terms of his deal were that Little Richard would sell his entire publishing rights for $50, which is more in 1955 than it is now, but still not a ton of money.
Right.
In exchange, he accepted a royalty rate on the master rights side of a half a cent per record sold. Now, at this time, even the standard for white artists was between 3 and 5 cents per record sold. So Little Richard got kind of a shitty deal even at the time, even amongst what were famously pretty shitty deals.
Yep.
And as a result of this, Tutti Frutti was a huge hit, and Little Richard didn't make really all that much money from it. Elvis covered Tutti Frutti. Pat Boone covered Tutti Frutti. There was a lot of money to be made on the publishing side, especially in this era where like black artists are like creating a lot of the great songs, and then Pat Boone or Elvis or whomever is going to make a cover, and that's going to be the one that really moves a lot of units.
Pat Boone covered Tutti Frutti?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to find out what that sounds like, because that sounds
Pat Boone covered everything.
Okay, well, that's true. He did. But man, Pat Boone's version of Tutti Frutti without hearing it, I can just picture it, and I don't love it.
I think you know what it's like.
Yeah, I do.
I think it sounds like mayonnaise tastes.
Yeah. Hey, I like a little mayonnaise once in a while. All right. Look at me.
But crucially here, while Little Richard made some money from the sales of his own records, because he had sold out the publishing, he didn't get any publishing royalties from these covers. And this was a predatory, but, you know, in sheer like business terms, a smart move from the people that would own labels, especially labels that had a lot of like black artists, because they know that most of the money is going to come on the pub side from covers and things like that. And so they use this to take advantage of the artists and not really have to pay them that much while scooping up a lot of money for themselves. And Little Richard did eventually sue the label, by the way, in 1984. He sued for $112 million and settled for an undisclosed amount. But, you know, we will never know exactly what he made, but probably not what he would have made if he had like the proper fair shake of the rights all the way up to that, you know, that time.
And how settlements typically go, it's that always grabs the headline. Oh, he sued for this much because that's public information. And when they settle for an undisclosed amount, it's almost never the amount that you see in the headline.
We're prepared to offer your client free coffee for life, and I'll take it.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
So yeah, this just know, like, I'm using this as a good example, but like there are a lot of stories like this where it was just a predatory time. Little Richard had a quote. He said, "I was a dumb black kid. I wanted to help my family. So I took whatever was offered." And that's how a lot of people felt at the time. You want to be a musician? Here's a guy that can make it a reality. And yeah, they're going to take all the money, but
you're going to get something.
What else are you going to do?
You're going to get something versus nothing is probably how it feels.
Yeah, probably that $50 was meaningful at the time, even though it was exploitative.
Yes.
So zooming forward a little bit, I want to talk about one really interesting. We're going to do a couple little case studies and then get into the actual kind of modern thing that's happening.
I like this format.
So our next case study is going to be in 1997. And this is an interesting one. This is a bit of a proof of concept for what would come much later. So David Bowie wanted liquid cash to be able to buy back his own master recordings from a former manager. Again, bad deal. Manager owned a lot of these master recordings. David Bowie didn't want him to have it. The thing was, he could have sold out his publishing side in order to raise the money to buy back the master side. But he didn't want to do that because he would just be trading one side of rights for the other side of rights and be kind of in the same predicament.
Sure.
So he came up with a really, really interesting approach. In lieu of selling one side to do another, he basically securitized his own rights with the creation of what were called Bowie bonds. So he created asset-backed securities that were securitized by the publishing rights that David Bowie held on his own catalog. So he sought to raise $55 million, and to do it, he issued bonds against his albums that had been recorded prior to 1990, so like roughly 300 songs or so. He offered these, basically publicly into institutional investors. Investors bought bonds with a 7.9 coupon, so a 7.9% interest rate over 10 years. Okay. And interestingly, Moody's, the famous credit rating agency, gave the bonds an A3 rating, which is investment grade. That's a pretty good bond rating. Yeah. For just being securitized by David Bowie's rights. This is the first time. Bowie. Yeah, exactly. This is the first time a musician's IP was rated like a corporation. And so what's kind of happening there, and this is an interesting thing that continues to this time, though it's gone through some shakeups, is that Moody's and the credit rating agency are looking at the stability of income from this particular asset. And what they're looking at for the first time they're ever looking at music rights is that the income from this asset is really stable over time. Because people's listening to music, especially like these days, is not significantly affected by economic headwinds the way that other things are.
Yeah. It's a relatively inexpensive form of entertainment on the listening side. Performing and going to seeing a live show is a different story, but an album cost hasn't really came up that much proportionally. Like, yes, there are expensive things here and there, but largely it's not the craziest expenditure for people.
No. And even there, I mean, remember, it's not just that they're making money when the album is sold. It's also that they're making money when, it's synced onto, TV or played on the radio or performed by another artist, which is definitely happening with a lot of David Bowie songs. Mm-hmm. All those things kind of aggregate en masse to make the total income that's coming out of a particular song or catalog. And while, you might go through a phase where you're listening to David Bowie a whole bunch for 3 weeks and then not listen to it for another year, en masse across the entire world, a lot of people are going in and out of those phases, and you have stuff being played at sporting events and all this stuff. Amongst all the noise, it standardizes into a really consistent asset overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
So this is how he gets that.
I did not know he did this, and I did not know Moody's rated it. This is crazy.
Yeah, it was new to me too. Mm-hmm. So because of this, and again, this is really kind of the first time anyone's looking at these to grade them as an investment. But that's a really good overall grading. And as a result, people buy up these bonds. David Bowie got his $55 million upfront tax-free because, again, he's issuing a bond, which is effectively like taking out a loan. Mm-hmm. You're not selling something, you're taking out a loan against something. So he didn't have to pay any taxes. Investors got their interest. He was able to buy back his master side and kept 100% ownership of his songs by, again, paying off the investors with the income from the publishing side. He owned the master side right away. That probably helped pay that transaction a little bit. And then, zoom forward past the expiration date of the bond, and Bowie owns it all.
In a weird way, this is like a win-win-win for everybody, because Bowie got his rights back, utilizing the rights he could have sold, mm-hmm. but instead he kept them. The investors got to make their 7%. Mm-hmm. And the people who owned the rights that he was trying to buy got paid as well. Everybody got paid in this situation. Yep. That is unusual.
Yeah, it can happen. And we'll talk about it more as we keep going. But that's the thing, is a lot of the question is, it's just like parsing out the time value of money as to mm-hmm. why things make sense for everybody to get paid and why it makes sense on both sides of the transaction. Mm-hmm. One interesting side note that I want to mention of this is that while the bonds were rated an A3 in 1997, by the early 2000s, Moody's downgraded the bonds basically to junk status, Baa3, because Napster happened.
Oh.
And so what had mm-hmm. been an incredibly consistent rights, income stream over the past many decades suddenly became very inconsistent in a lot of ways. And a lot of people were worried about it, mm-hmm. Which really kind of destroyed secondary sales of the bonds. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, Bowie just made his payments over the time, and then things all worked out fine. But if you were looking to get out from under those bonds in 2003, they were not going to net you much of what you paid for them initially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Which is a bit of a microcosm of the whole music industry, but I found it interesting nonetheless.
It is. Yeah, that's crazy.
So let's look at another case study, and this will be probably the one that most people have heard of if they've heard of anything from these types of rights transactions. So in 1983, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson are friends. They're making songs together, like the Girl Is Mine off Thriller. They're hanging, they're buds. Paul advises Michael, the real money is in publishing. He shows Michael a notebook filled with different rights that he had purchased. He had purchased Buddy Holly's rights, some other things like that. And Michael gets an interesting idea from this. I should probably get in on this too. So the asset in question is ATV Music. ATV Music is a publishing rights holder, so a publishing company basically. It's owned by an Australian corporate raider named Robert Holmes à Court. The crown jewel of ATV Music's catalog is a smaller publishing imprint called Northern Songs, which contains most all of the Beatles catalog. So 251 Lennon-McCartney hits amongst, the best assets in like music rights that you could ever possibly hold, right?
Yes.
So it also includes some songs by Little Richard and the Kinks. It's kind of a roll up of a number of different publishing rights. So it's not just the Beatles, but it's the Beatles. Like that's the most important bit of all of it.
The crown jewel is a great way to phrase that, for sure.
Yeah. So this is going up for sale. Paul McCartney really wants it, as you can imagine, considering that they're mostly his songs. So Paul McCartney really wanted it, but he refused to bid alone. Because again, he only is only half of this. He asked Yoko Ono and basically John Lennon's estate to split the price of the publishing company that they wanted to buy. Basically just saying the price is too high for him to want to do it on his own. And again, Lennon was the other half of a lot of those songs anyway, right?
Sure.
So ATV is up for sale for $47.5 million from that same Australian corporate raider. Paul's trying to get that bid together. Yoko won't go in on him, so that doesn't work. He's seemingly kind of trying to figure out how to get this money together because, it does not seem like he has that amount of money, at least liquid, that he's willing to put into one thing. Meanwhile, Paul's old dear friend and person with a lot of money in the early 80s, Michael Jackson, swoops in underneath Paul and without saying anything to him to close the deal himself. Couple interesting side notes to this. Jackson's lawyer, John Branca, had to add a few personal touches in order to close the deal because the person that was holding it kind of expected to sell it to Paul, yada, yada, yada. So Michael Jackson agreed to perform a charity concert in Perth, Australia, which at least at the time was the most isolated city of more than 1 million people in the world. Now it's Honolulu. But Perth is pretty isolated. It's all the way on the western side of Australia. People don't really tour through there very often because it's really far away from everything.
It's hard to get to for Westerners, basically.
Yeah. It's mostly just hard to route through. You're going to play at Perth and then have to go either to the eastern side of Australia, which is a long way away, or up to Southeast Asia or whatever.
Worth noting, just to put it out there, Honolulu did not move. It grew to a population of 1 million.
It's further away than ever. Honolulu used to be just off the coast of California.
Yeah, it's now drifted way out into the Pacific Ocean.
One other sweetener from this. So Jackson, while he purchased the overall publishing company, he agreed to gift the rights to Penny Lane, just the one song, to Holmes à Court, the current owner's teenage daughter, as it was her favorite song.
Wow.
So she got to hold on to the rights to Penny Lane, which is not a bad thing to stick in your back pocket.
No. If I could just get one Beatles hit song that I could own, I would be doing real good.
I think you do okay.
Yeah.
So with these sweeteners in tow, Michael Jackson buys the entire catalog for the $47.5 million that it was being asked for. And Paul McCartney was completely blindsided in this whole circumstance.
Did they you may not know this, but did they have a falling out prior to this? Okay. So they were already kind of
I don't know that they had a falling out prior to. They had a falling out afterwards.
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine doing that to somebody that is a friend, even if it's a genius business deal. It's crazy.
Yeah. Because we don't know the exact innards of, Paul's decision making or what his strategy was in the negotiation. But I would imagine that he was kind of thinking all right, I'm not going to pay him 47.5. I'm going to offer something here, a little bit underneath, as you do when you're negotiating something like this. And then Michael swooped in and offered the full amount, plus let him keep Penny Lane, and agreed to play all the way in Perth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's as the seller, it's hard to turn that down, even though I think it's a corporate raider. Probably didn't feel too bad about it, I guess.
I don't know that he felt too bad about it.
Yeah, probably not.
Money's green, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting because this is one of the greatest investments of all time. So Michael Jackson buys this circa 1985, $47.5 million. Remember that number.
Mm-hmm.
He holds it as just ATV, publishing for some time. About 10 years later in 1995, Michael Jackson needs cash. All the upkeep on the zoo animals and mounting legal battles are taking their toll in some way. And he needs a little bit of money.
I need some money.
Oh, no. So he hits up Sony Music Publishing and makes a proposition of what if we go into business together? So Sony merges with Michael Jackson's ATV Music to form Sony ATV, which is still the name, at least like a couple years ago, last time I looked, that's still the name of Sony's publishing arm. That's how big this catalog was, that all of Sony Music Publishing was like, okay, we can merge as, almost equals here or there.
Wow. That's wild.
That's crazy. But that's what wild. The weight of the Beatles rights catalog is, right? So Sony pays $95 million to Michael Jackson just for the ability to merge with ATV. Jackson still keeps 50% of all of Sony ATV.
Okay. Wow, that's a good deal for him.
Yeah,
just
exactly. So it's not even like a merger of equals. It's like, here's extra cash and we're going to be 50, you're going to be 50% owner. So this like one transaction gets him to basically be like almost a square partner with all of Sony Music's publishing, like the largest major label.
I did not know it went this deep. This is wild.
Yeah, it's a monster. So he's already got $95 million out. He's already doubled his money 10 years later. But that's not the end of it, because in 2016, after Michael Jackson's death, his estate, wanting to, as estates do, liquidate things down to liquid capital they can distribute, sells the remaining 50% to Sony for $750 million.
Whoa. This worked out great for the Jackson estate.
So between the 95 and the 750, he's about, $845 million. Cost him 47.5. So, we're about what, $797.5 million netted on this transaction.
That works out. It
works out pretty good.
He made himself a good decision.
I suspect, by the way, I could be wrong about this, but you would, if it were me, I would look at the family, the estate, as a forced seller in this circumstance. They're looking to sell half of Sony ATV, which is a 50-50 thing. Sony's the natural purchaser. So I would say the $750 million is even like a little bit of a sweet, like a lower price than it probably was worth as a true asset.
Yeah, that's fair, because I'm sure there's a lot of legal things, hopefully, that maybe would prevent this. But like, what if, a competitor bought it? What if Richard Branson swooped in and was like, you know what? I'll give you a cool bill. Or it's Universal, but they're sitting across the table and they each own 50, and it gets all sorts of weird. So that is all to say, I suspect that like they were the most logical buyer for it, and so the price was a little bit lower than even what it was worth in real terms. For sure. Yeah.
Right. So that is all to say that interesting things around artists, master and publishing rights, and the sales they're in and who owns them and all this has been existing for a while. This has been a thing. There's been some notable transactions that have occurred over time, but they have been comparatively few and far between compared to what it's like now.
Mm-hmm.
So let me recap just a couple, and there's a lot more. Like you noted Zach Bryan, which I didn't even have in my recap, but that happened. So in 2020, right around the pandemic, this is kind of the first one to really break. Bob Dylan sells his rights to Universal Music Publishing. Now he's selling just his publishing rights, like I mentioned earlier. So just like the words and the music and all that, not the master recording rights. It's estimated that he sold these for some $300 to $400 million. These are not necessarily like all public transactions, so we don't always know the exact amount. Depends on the transaction. So this kind of kicks things off. Bob Dylan's like, I'll take my $400 million. I'll take my $400 million early in the pandemic, and screws off to, well, he doesn't really. He keeps touring and does everything.
He keeps touring,
but he keeps doing it with $400 million in his pocket.
You saw him somewhat recently.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did. That was really cool. I got to see Bob Dylan for the listeners out there in like a 1,500, 1,200 cap room.
I would love
which was really, really cool. He did like a small club tour. It was really special. I thought it was great, honestly. And I will briefly note that like While a lot of people are like, oh, Bob Dylan doesn't sound, that good anymore. I don't think his voice was ever meant to sound good in a baseball stadium. That's not the kind of
No.
music he makes. In like a smaller club with 4 walls, it made all the sense in the world. It sounded great.
He started in the Gaslight. Like, what do you mean? That's where he belongs.
Yeah, that's where it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that Dylan deal really just kind of kicks things off, and there's a bunch more that follow. The next one up in 2021, Bruce Springsteen sold both his masters and his publishing. So he's selling both sides of this situation to Sony Music for about $550 million, which is the highest price for a single artist at the time. So Springsteen's basically selling both sides. From this point forward, if you're licensing a Springsteen song or playing it on the radio or buying, an album or anything like that, he doesn't make any money.
Mm-hmm.
But
he cashed in.
He made $550 million. So he's doing okay.
Yeah. Don't shed any tears. He's doing all right.
He's doing just fine. Yeah. Justin Bieber in 2023, as you noted, this is an interesting one because he's comparatively younger. He sells his publishing and artist royalties, so basically just the pub side, pre-2022 to Hypnosis Songs Capital for about $200 million. This is an interesting transaction in that he's just selling everything that he's done up to that point.
Right. Nothing after that.
Right. Springsteen, Dylan, not reported on, but it's not, the most important stuff's probably behind them anyway. I don't mean that in like a rude way, but like, the most important songs Bob Dylan will ever write were written some time ago, most likely.
Yeah, and I think the unfortunate reality is even if the new material was just as good and just as interesting,
it's just never exactly.
There was a time and place that these things had to really land to skyrocket the way they did.
Yeah, that's Same not with Justin likely Bieber. To be recreated. Same with Justin Bieber, but who knows? He's a little bit younger, so it's not impossible to think that he might have, other really big hits. Yeah.
I'm waiting for Justin's metalcore era to hit. That's when I'm going to jump in.
It could happen. Now, that record that was set with Bruce Springsteen in 2021 for $550 million does not stand very long because by 2024, Sony Music acquires the rights to the band Queen for $1.27 billion.
Yes. This is an interesting one to me personally, because I think it was maybe 3 years ago on yet another podcast I do called the Chasing Tone podcast. We were debating who was like, quote unquote, the biggest artist in the world. And simply by the measure of how many people are listening to them right now. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked to find Queen was stomping everybody. Mm-hmm. Even now, at least at that time, I couldn't believe how many like streams and monthly Spotify listeners. They're such a they're big in the States. Don't get me wrong. Everybody knows Queen, but they are globally so enormous that this number doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah, they're one of those bands. Also, an important piece of this number is that what they sold. So they sold their master side, they sold their publishing side, they sold their name, and they sold their likeness, all as a part of the deal. That's why I'm like reading off the assets for each one, because it can vary. Like the Dylan one's just pub side. He still has masters. Bruce Springsteen's both. Queen is both those and the rights to your likeness and the name and everything.
Meaning we can put your face on whatever we want.
Anything we want, and we will.
Yes.
Yes.
Even things you'd rather your face wasn't on.
The only thing that I saw that was notably held out of the deal was live revenue. So if the band wants to tour and play, they're not like paying all that money from them playing up to Sony. They hang on to that. But the rest of it, the t-shirts sold at Walmart, which are honestly probably a massive piece.
Oh yeah,
of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's all going to Sony at this point. And they really smartly, I think it was smart at least, they did this pretty shortly thereafter, the Bohemian Rhapsody biopic.
Ah, that helps.
So that like popped off, of course, and made, I think that's probably a big piece of the spike in listenership and whatnot. And Brian May, ever the incredibly intelligent dude, capitalized on this to sell at this time.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And if you would like to hear more about Mr. Brian May, go listen to my podcast with Ariel, one of his good friends. All right, there you go. Pluggity plug.
Cool. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
All right. We got two more to talk about. So also in 2024, same year, Pink Floyd sells their catalog to Sony. And this is a little bit similar. So they do their masters, they do their name, their likenesses, and all the album artwork, but not the publishing side.
Okay, got it.
So they hold that back. So again, all of these deals, part of why it's more or less money is just how complete the thing that's being sold is. And that varies a little bit deal by deal. But they do make about $400 million off this. And this is a bit of an interesting circumstance because David Gilmour admitted that he mostly pushed for the sale just to be done with all of the arguing with Roger Waters.
He did
now
say
they've
that.
sold it. He did. Yeah. It's like now they've sold it. Like there's no, they have famously they've been feuding for decades.
Yes.
Decades.
And I'll admit, I don't know all the interpersonal relationships, and Roger Waters is a brilliant musician, but he seems like a difficult man to get along with.
He does a little bit.
Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
he does. And so, from Gilmour's side, I kind of get it. He's like, it's just going to be one big lump sum. We're going to split it up. And then there's not going to be this constant battling over, what we should or shouldn't do with the music.
Yes.
So one final one, but I think it's interesting, is a final 2024 transaction, which was Kevin Parker, aka Tame Impala, sold his rights to Sony. And interestingly, unlike many, he sold his current and his future rights to everything.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I knew he sold. Didn't realize he included the future. That's interesting.
So the sum wasn't disclosed on this particular deal, but the interesting thing is that you hear about people kind of betting on themselves. In some ways, Kevin Parker bet against himself.
Yeah.
Because he sold all the future stuff too. So he basically is saying this is worth more now than it's ever going to be. I'm confident that I'm sure he didn't think it through this way, but it reads like I'm not going to have another hit that's going to raise the value of this. I'm only going to detract from the value of my catalog from here on out. I better sell it and everything in the future.
Or maybe it's not necessarily, I don't think I'm going to have another hit. It's I'm not feeling like working that hard moving forward.
You never know. He did put out an album recently that I did not like.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I think I'm not alone. But who knows? Anyway,
you're allowed to not like things, even if you like the artist. That's okay. It's acceptable.
It's true. This is just a snapshot of the deals that got done in this really hot period. But I think it's interesting. It's a broad range of people at different ages and different reasons for selling and what things they're selling, what things they're not selling, and all that. But all of them are in the 9 figures or more.
Yeah. It's a lot of money.
A lot. So you might ask, with all this money floating around, who are the players? Who's buying this stuff?
Yeah, I do want to know. Hypnosis is one that I feel like I see the most, but maybe that's not right.
Yeah, so there's a couple different categories of buyers. I kind of created 3 different categories. We'll talk about the disruptors, the private equity giants, and the empire.
Okay, the empire.
So initially, the disruptors. So these are pure play funds. And what that means is these are funds that all they do is invest in music rather than it being one piece of a larger catalog. So Hypnosis, as you mentioned, this was founded by Mercuriadis, the former manager of Beyonce and Elton John. He kind of was really instrumental in a lot of this, more recent, I'll call it a bubble, by convincing that Wall Street that songs are better than gold or oil. You should really invest in these things. There's gold in them hills. Originally, they IPO'd on the London Stock Exchange and raised over $1 billion, but later the firm faced financial scrutiny and was acquired by private equity giant Blackstone for about $1.6 billion in 2024. Notably, they purchased Justin Bieber's catalog, as we mentioned, Shakira's catalog, Neil Young, Red Hot Chili Peppers, a whole bunch of other stuff. And their strategy is a fairly active management. So they'll work to place older songs in TikToks and video games and stuff like that to try to force them back into the culture and raise the value.
Okay.
All right. Next up of these pure play funds, and there's a lot more. There's a lot of smaller ones. This is Primary Wave. founded by Larry Mestel, backed by Brookfield Asset Management, which is like a massive RE and infrastructure firm. They committed $1.7 billion to them. They bought Whitney Houston, Bob Marley, Prince, Stevie Nicks, and a bunch of others. Their strategy is more being the brand partner. So unlike a lot of others, they'll often only buy 50% of the rights and partner with the artist to build the brand. So they might, open a Bob Marley resort or start a Whitney Houston makeup line and do these things. So they're seen in some ways as maybe less, I don't want to say predatory because people are getting paid out. So it's not really that, but like they're partnering. You're going to continue to have, a stake in this. What they're essentially telling you, much like, a Shark Tank investor or something like that, is we're going to buy 50% of your thing, but then we're going to work really hard to increase its value and make more money from it. So your 50%, of that thing is going to be worth maybe as much as what your 100% is right now when we're not working on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it'll keep your legacy going forward and keep it generating things for the future. It's more of a collaborator versus we own it now and we're going to do what we want with it.
It is. And, if it were me, and God, I sure wish that I had a catalog worth this kind of money, but if it were me and they're like, your catalog's worth $400 million, do you want to sell it all off right now? Maybe that'll be smart. Maybe it'll be stupid. Maybe it's worth more in the future. If it were me, I'd be like, let me take half of it off the table. Let me take my 200 million right now and then keep the other 200 million riding. That way, if it goes up by a whole bunch, I don't feel like a total idiot. I still got skin in the game. If it goes down by a whole bunch, well, hey, I'm sure glad that I took half the money off the table when I did. It's hard to lose selling 50% at a valuation like that.
Yeah, that is very true. And there's another thing too, that this is something I wanted to touch on after you listed out some of these deals, is most of these artists, including a lot of the ones you rattled off that weren't necessarily a case study, they are older. I'm not saying old. That's not all of them are like, in their 70s, but some of them are. There is the time value of money, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're 70 and someone's like, I'm going to give you $400 million, what are the odds you're going to live long enough, even if you're Bob Dylan, to make more than that over the time? I hate to say it, but the odds are not in favor of that, especially, with the harder lifestyles of back in the day. So you're more than likely going to be better taking that money and wisely investing it and then continuing to make music. No one's saying you can't continue to do your thing, right? It's just using the assets you've already built in the wisest way. And I totally understand why some of these are happening when a lot of people are like, oh no, they wouldn't be paying you that much if they thought it wasn't worth more. It's like, of course, that's how investments work. And sometimes investments are worth more in someone else's hands than they are the current owners. So also, these firms probably going to last longer over time. They're going to have CEOs are going to churn out. Long, good standing businesses are a thing that exists. So, and that's what the firms are betting on. That's my theory anyway.
We'll get to all that.
Oh, there's more.
No, you're fine. So that was just one group that's buying it. So the second category, the private equity giants that are involved in a lot of these. So Litmus Music is a big one. They're funded by the Carlyle Group, which is one of the largest PE firms. They've got about a $500 million war chest. Their big buys were Katy Perry's catalog for about $225 million, as well as Keith Urban's catalog. And their strategy is buying more modern kind of pop hits that define the millennial generation, betting that they're going to kind of become the classic rock of the future. So rather than going out and buying Queen, they're going to buy some stuff now that they're suspecting is going to be worth a whole lot more in 30 years. Another of the private equity firms that are involved is Harborview Equity Partners. They're backed by Apollo Global Management, which is a massive PE firm. They've bought Wiz Khalifa, Despacito, Nelly, and their strategy is pretty interesting. And you touched on this, actually. So what they're viewing is that a lot of hip hop and Latin music is undervalued by traditional buyers. Because right now, the highest multiples have been white male classic rock bands or artists. And they're betting that, something like Despacito or Wiz Khalifa is going to be worth a whole lot more in the future once people figure out that there's no reason that like a play of a, Rolling Stone song is worth more than a play of a Wiz Khalifa song.
Right.
It's just a lot of the people with a lot of money right now want to be like, I own Queen.
Right.
And those same guys aren't going to get nearly as much clout for owning, the Despacito catalog.
Sure.
at the country club. So I think that that's an interesting strategy that they're taking. Just a couple more. Concord is our third and final of the PE firms that we'll talk about. They're an independent giant. They're backed by the Michigan State Retirement System. They raised $1.8 billion in bond offerings to buy a whole bunch of catalogs. And for anybody listening out there, private equity typically works for teachers' retirement funds and state retirement funds and pension funds. That's who they work for. Most commonly. I mean, they also like work for individual and institutional things, but a lot of it's pension funds and stuff like that. So in some regards, if you were like a state worker for Michigan, you do own a chunk of the Alice in Chains catalog. That's what's keeping your pension alive.
That's true.
But they acquired Roundhill Music, which is like the offspring, Alice in Chains. They also made a big deal to buy the Genesis and early Phil Collins catalogs. Their strategy is basically just scale. They've got a bunch of money and they're going out and just buying as much of it as possible and basically betting that they'll be able to administer these rights in a better way by owning so much of it that they can build a big team behind it, kind of like a major label, but without like the baggage of making any new bets on artists or development deals or anything like that.
Yeah, that is a big expensive thing that they have to deal with. And this is a different strategy. Let's take stuff that's already proven, dump a bunch of money into that rather than trying to find the next big thing.
Yep. And now finally, the Empire. The traditional giants, after a little while, kind of woke up and realized like, oh, crap. We're losing our history and our legacy in a lot of ways. Other people are coming in and swooping up and buying these catalogs. So they, as you heard from me reciting some of the recent deals, open their pocketbooks, especially Sony, in a really significant way. They're the ones that did the Queen deal, the Springsteen deal, were involved with Michael Jackson. They're paying in a lot of ways the highest prices because, Apollo Global Management can go out and buy a factory or buy oil fields or something instead. Sony's pretty much in the music business. And so this is what they're working on. This is what they're doing. And they're the ones that have all the expertise to be able to pay the highest multiples, basically. Yeah.
I don't think that I'm going to see, well, it could be wrong. I don't think we're going to see Sony investing in the local oil refinery, but maybe.
You never know.
They do need cameras in those places. So who knows?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Now, our final deep dive. Why are these transactions happening? Why are they happening for the seller and why are they happening for the buyer? Remember, any
that's why you wanted to wait.
Yeah. I got it in the timeline, man. Any deal takes, 2 to tango. It's an agreement between two parties. So if somebody's selling something for $500 million, you wanted to sell it for $500 million and the other people wanted to buy it for $500 million. And that's how it happened, right? So it has to make sense at some level for both sides. And there's a bit of a reason why that is. So for the artists, the single biggest motivation, especially broadly, if we're looking across all different, demographics and age ranges, the single biggest motivation is taxes. They're in effect taking a tax arbitrage in doing this. So let's look at like this example scenario. So an artist collects, say, $10 million a year in royalties. The IRS in America taxes this as ordinary income. So the top federal, tax rate's about 37% plus state tax. A lot of these people are in California, so that's another 13%. So you're looking at about a 50%-ish effective tax rate. So for that $10 million a year in royalties from the catalog, you're getting about $5 million net of taxes, right? So scenario B, if the artist sells those same songs for a $200 million lump sum, because they're selling an asset, they're not making earned income from it. This is typically taxed as capital gains, which the top cap gains tax rate is about 20% in the United States, a significantly lower tax rate than otherwise. Plus, there are like a lot of different ways you can monkey around with one-time capital gains things and rollovers and stuff like that. That is more in depth than I really understand it. But there's a lot more than they can do. And so as a result of this, the artist is saving a significant amount of money in taxes by doing this. Because even after that fact, once they invest that $200 million and are making, investment gains on that, those investments have held sufficiently long, are being taxed at the long-term capital gains rate. and they're never having to really fuss with this ordinary income tax rate of 50% again.
Right. And it's worth noting, too, that states often apply a capital gains tax as well. I think Oregon's is just shy of 10%. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I think it's in that ballpark. So even still, that's 30% total versus 50% total.
Yeah. And if it ever made sense in your entire life to establish residency in a lower tax state, it would be well worth the year of your time to do so the year before you sell your catalog for $550 million.
Very true.
And so you do see a lot of people moving to Tennessee or Texas or Florida or other places with no income tax or cap gains tax, because it's well worth spending half the year there establishing residency and then skipping out on the extra $30 million in California cap gains taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 6 months is well worth 30 mil to most people.
Yes. And for those of you out there that are less of tax wonks than I am, which I'm pretty nerdy about this stuff, if you're ever wondering, why are capital gains taxes so much lower than income taxes? Post-Bush tax cuts, we decided that money that you make from working should be taxed at a significantly higher rate than money somebody else makes from having money. And we basically lowered the value of actual work money compared to money made from income. And I think it's really dumb. But that is an opinion that everyone can have.
You're in the US, and for now, you can still have an opinion.
That's right. Yes. So as you touched on earlier, that's just one thing. Like, taxes are huge. And when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars a year, these are significant sums of money that people are paying. But the demographics totally come into play. And this is what you were touching on earlier. A lot of older artists are doing this for estate planning purposes in some ways. It's just easier for them to have a big lump sum, set that lump sum up into a trust, rather than having these ongoing royalty streams that they're passing on and having split out in various ways. Because also, like, that trust, they can pay the tax on the $400 million, put it into trust for those heirs, and then those are subject to like taxation as a result of that, which is more minimal than passing on an income generating asset.
It allows them to do more complicated things is a lot.
That's basically what it is. Yeah. On the face of it, all these things are taxed, in some way, like you're going to get hit with the estate tax, but there's plenty. There are millions of people probably whose job is working on like how to avoid estate taxes and set up trusts and do all this sort of stuff. So yeah, as you noted, they're getting more flexibility that they can play with. Interestingly to me, though, it's the younger artists that are really fascinating to me. The Justin Biebers, the Kevin Parker from Tame Impala, Katy Perry, these people. I do get it, though, because they're really de-risking and deconcentrating their assets. Like if you're Justin Bieber and you're worth, say, $300 million and most of that's just these ongoing rights values, that is all caught up in your, like that's all together, and it creates a concentration risk, right? It's in you. And so circumstances, like if you think about your nest egg or whatever, the circumstances where you might need to draw on it are where you like lose your job and aren't making any money anymore. Let's think about circumstances that would happen to a Justin Bieber. It could be that he did something that's reprehensible in a public way. And now he is getting in a lot of trouble. Nobody are big fans. Nobody wants to go to his concerts. They're not listening to his music anymore, yada, yada, yada. And this has happened to people. In that circumstance, if all of your money is tied up in the value of your own catalog just took a massive hit at the same time that you would really need to access that money.
Right.
You sell it out while you haven't done anything to piss people off too much, and you've now got $400 million in the bank or in, like a low-cost S&P index funds. That's uncorrelated. That has nothing to do with how people view Justin Bieber. And so you've got a nice nest egg you can draw on if you ever put your foot in your mouth or do something, untoward.
Not to mention tastes just shift. And maybe you're pretty confident that people are going to love you in 10 years. Or maybe you're like, I'm kind of having my moment right now. And I'm going to take my chips off the table. That's very taste shift all the time. And how many times have we seen a one-hit wonder? It happens. And if that one-hit wonder had taken their chips off the table while they had that hit going, it would be worth a lot more than in 5 years when nobody remembers who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you might wonder if a lot of them are worried that AI is going to, disrupt the music industry in some way. And AI artists will be earning a lot of the royalties and taking money away from them. An
For the audio listeners, Scott just did air quotes around artists.
I did. Sorry, I shouldn't do the air quotes. In a lot of ways, what's happening in this transaction is you're not just betting on the value of the assets today, you're betting on the future value of those assets to earn money, which is two parts, both the popularity of those songs and those assets, which can shift, but also the degree to which those assets can create return on capital via like how the actual music business works, right? Mm-hmm. So like what something was worth in 1990 is very different from 2003, post Napster. And who knows, over 10, 20, 30 years, what other things could happen that could be good or could be bad.
Yeah, it's the de-risking thing, I think, is another angle that a lot of general listeners just don't think about. Like what's going to happen. Now, as we mentioned before, there's another side of these transactions. There are these investment firms as well. So what is it about these particular assets that these guys are going whole hog on? Well, the biggest one is that Wall Street loves assets that have what they call uncorrelated yield, meaning they don't have anything to do with the stock market. Yeah. They love, if you have a whole bunch of stocks in your portfolio, stocks have a tendency to move up and down together. They don't all do it, but like the market tends to shift and ebb and flow up and down at the same time. This is why if you're, a boglehead, like nerd investor like me, you want to own the whole haystack. You want to own as much of bonds and stocks around the world as possible in hopes that you can capture as much diversity as possible. So one thing's going down, the other thing's going up, and it kind of keeps things mostly stable. Well, in this picture, a lot of like investors will use things like bonds to offset stocks because they're not perfectly correlated, but they are somewhat correlated. But again, the money that's being made on Bruce Springsteen's catalog has functionally nothing to do with the ups and downs of the S&P or the, domestic bond market or anything like that. So even if it's lower yielding, having that stability that's going to be there for you when everything else takes a dump is a nice piece of an overall portfolio. Yes, right? 100%. And that's the big thing that was kind of sold to these investors and that they really kind of bought in on is that nobody stops listening to music when there's an economic crash. And so it has a value in an overall asset portfolio to keep things stable. And that's why you'll see, funds like the Michigan State Retirement Fund investing in these because it's a lot more stable. They want stability to continue to make their payments to retirees. And so they're not necessarily looking for the next NVIDIA. They're just looking for what's going to create stability in their overall account. Yeah, 100%. So in essence, investors view these hit songs as utilities. A catalog like Queen offers a pretty predictable, 4 to 6% annual return that's just safe from recessions or anything like that. And that's the real meat of it. That's really what it's for. And that's why they're trading at such high multiples versus something like a small business or something like that might trade at, or real estate, because of their uncorrelated return. And so the multiples that we've been seeing, and I guess I should back up a little bit. So to arrive at the valuation of anything, whether it's a business or anything like that, you're typically looking at a multiple on earnings. So what they do in this world, they'll look at the net publisher share. So this is the annual profit that a particular song makes. And then the multiple is basically how many years of profit the buyer is going to pay up front for the seller to walk away. Right? So if you have an asset that pays you $1,000 a year and I come in and I'm like, hey, I'll give you 10 grand right now. You might be like, well, no, in 11 years or 12 years, I'm going to be at 11 grand or 12 grand. But you might also look at it smartly as like, well, I'm going to be earning, say, 8% per annum over the next 10 years. And so by the time I'm to that 11th year where I would have gotten my 11,000th dollar, I'm probably significantly ahead of that. I'm probably like $25,000 by then. Yeah. Let's not even mention the fact that I don't have to do anything for that.
Yes. And that is a nice thing about catalogs too that I should have mentioned. You're right. The costs of administering a catalog, especially if you're administering multiple, like especially administering the nth catalog. So if you're administering 100 catalogs and you add the 101st, it's not creating an enormous increase in costs.
Yeah, you're not adding like 12 people to manage that. It's kind of just going into somebody's job.
Yep, exactly. Everyone, adds this into the stuff that they're pitching. So historically, catalogs would sell for like 8 to 12x their annual profit, which is a pretty solid multiple overall, mostly owing to uncorrelation and, low cost of administering, just stability overall, basically. In the current frenzy, especially from 2020 to 2024, multiples were hitting 25x and 30x.
That's wild.
Unbelievable multiples. So Sony's deal with Bruce Springsteen paid approximately 30 years worth of future royalties up front. So when they do that, Sony is basically betting that they're going to be able to make that money back faster than 30 years. 30 years is a very long time to recoup your money.
Yes, it is. Yep. So it's not just that we're going to be around for at least 30 years, which the Sony probably is if we're looking at how long they've been around. It's also, we think we can speed this up because we're going to actively work on it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a big piece of it. And another big piece to this, and I don't want to say this broadly because why people sell things is a very personal thing that can have to do with a lot of things in your own life. There's all sorts of different reasons to do it. But in a broad way, like speaking on average, the money, the big money, the private equity firms, Sony, all these pure play companies, big money is betting on streaming making a lot of money down the road.
Okay. Interesting.
That's what they're doing. I mean, and billions of dollars are pouring in to buy these things. And yeah, they're making money from syncs and all this other stuff, but they're ultimately betting on streaming paying off a significant chunk of money over time. Specifically, like they seem to be betting on streaming royalties increasing.
Okay.
That's the only reason you do it. That's the only reason you'd pay 30 years earnings for something is you're estimating that that's going to significantly increase. The artists, again, en masse, are not. They're betting against streaming. And that's interesting to me because, who will be right? Frequently, like the people deploying billions and billions and billions of dollars that are like quantitatively driven are righter about stuff like that than the people that are like going on vibes.
They also have,
but they're not always right. They can be very wrong sometimes.
That's true. But they also have the ability, how should I say this? Because they are deploying billions of dollars, they have a way to put the thumb on the scale to make themselves more right than they would have been otherwise.
Yep. Mm-hmm. No, you're exactly right. If you get those rights to Springsteen and Queen and Michael Jackson and a bunch of those all together, and you can show up at the table with the major streaming players and tell them what it's going to take for you to get access to these catalogs, you've got a lot more bargaining power than if you're just Keith Urban and, whose catalog's worth a lot. But if you just show up at Spotify's door, I don't know that they care.
Yeah, that's a good point. So say you're one of these firms, you own everybody, not everybody, but you have something that gets billions and billions of streams and you show up to Spotify and say, I'm going to need you to bump that rate up by 10, 20%, or we're going to leave and we're going to go to Jay-Z. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I guess we have to, because that is what they're buying. They're buying not eyeballs in this case, but ears. They're buying attention. Mm-hmm. Attention has become the most valuable commodity that exists in this world in a lot of ways.
Attention is the new oil. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep.
Which is wild. Wild to see these predictions from many years ago start to play out in real time in established businesses.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing to me is, there's a lot of diversity in the types of deals that are being done here. When it comes to something like, is Bob Dylan making the right decision? I don't know. He's pretty old already. Probably. I think probably. Mm-hmm. Like it's hard to argue with like just getting that money regardless. And it's a lot of money. Is somebody younger, somebody like a Katy Perry or something that like still has probably 30, 40 years on this earth? Are they making the right decision? Maybe, maybe not. I think the diversification, if I was their financial advisor, I would say at a 30x multiple, take the money, put it in an S&P index fund and chill.
Especially
BTI
depending
and
on
chill,
especially
my girl.
yeah, BTI and chill. Especially depending on what your plans are. Maybe your plans are to be done. If you don't plan on making any more music, like I'm kind of burned out on the whole music industry. I hate it. I don't want to do it anymore. Here's a great way to stop doing it. You know, a lot of people, you'll see acts that you're like, why are they still doing it? Some of them, it's because they love it and they can't do anything else. They don't want to do anything else. Some of them, it's because they have to. We've all seen, I won't name any names, but some basically corpses propped up on stage, and people are like, keep dancing, monkey. We need to make 10 grand tonight. And they're like, I don't want to, but I'm here because I have to, because all these people depend on me. So this is a way out of that.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, another thing that just strikes me as odd in our current ecosystem around the money in music is that, you know, there's never like, it feels like a lot of artists, at least, whether this is true or not, like, and I think it probably broadly is, are like, oh, it's impossible to make enough money through streaming revenue to make things make sense as a working musician. It's interesting to have that reality at the same time as the multiples on the value of the rights of those songs are astronomical. What it strikes me as, and it's not true for everybody, is it's kind of like an entrepreneur. Like it's a good example. It's like an entrepreneur being like, I barely make $35,000 a year, and you're like, but your business is worth $300 million.
Right.
It's just all in the payout. But again, you know, that's not necessarily accessible to a young modern band. Like that money doesn't exist right now for them unless they create a preemptive deal like Kevin Parker did. So it's just curious is all I'm really getting at with that statement, is like there's such a disparity between the value of the asset and the income produced by the asset in real time, if that makes sense.
What I'm kind of gathering from this, if I'm trying to peer into my super cloudy crystal ball that doesn't often tell me a whole lot, is big money is betting that the streaming is going to pay better. And independent artists are obviously like not getting what they need out of it currently. But maybe the goal should be to try to hang on as long as you can, because the music industry is going to be encouraged to change from what it is currently doing by all these billions of dollars floating into it. Now, indie artists are not seeing those billions of dollars, but maybe as rates rise, they can get not a seat at the table probably because they're too small, but maybe they can rise with it. Hopefully. That's an optimistic look at it. So long as the deals that are hatched are deals about the broad payments of royalties from a streaming platform and not individual sweetheart deals where they're getting paid a higher share. Which I hate to say is probably somewhat likely.
I think it's likely happening now. Anyway, that has been a deep dive into the finances of publishing and master rights sales. I really enjoyed this episode. I wonder how you, dear listeners, felt about it. Let us know, please, because it's a bit of a departure from our usual scheduled programming. But I think it's kind of fun to talk about these things when they do exist in the particular music world that we so often cover here on Tape Spaghetti.
Yeah. Let us know. Do you want to hear more about the business side of music, or do I need to find another beheading to cover? You let me know what's going to be best. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you, Scott, for presenting this. I find this stuff all very interesting too. I really do. And I think that if more artists did pay attention to some of this stuff, they would maybe be a little better off in their career as artists. So getting it out there for people to check out in a digestible way, I think is a good thing. You can totally do this while you're folding your laundry or mowing the lawn. I think share it with somebody you think would get something out of it. Share it with somebody you think needs educated on the inner workings of the music industry. And if you fell asleep, share it with somebody who has insomnia. We'll be back next time. I'll talk to you on the internet very soon. Thank you.